Hiya, this is the Funded Proposers Subcircle's closing report. Um, this was a project from Fund 8, and you can see the idea scale linked to it there. That'll be in the video description as well if you want to have a closer look. But essentially, the project funded a group of people from across the world to support Mercy in her role as the elected rep for funded proposers on Catalyst Circle version 3, and to help with problem sensing and community engagement and organising. So without further ado, let's find out a little bit more about the project. First of all, the Subcircle team. There was Mercy herself, then there was Tran, Amelia Sarfo, Steve Lockhart, Vanessa Cardui, Alex Peschanka, and Stephen Wittenstall. And as you can see, if you know these people, they come from several different communities geographically and linguistically, and they're also involved with a wide range of different interest groups in the proposers community. Everything from video making to governance to community engagement to the developer community. So that has been quite important in the way that the proposal has worked and how it's achieved what it's done. Now, a few facts and figures about the proposal itself, just quickly. It was in the Scale Up Cardano's Community Hubs Fund in Fund 8. The budget was $14,215 for 3 months' work for 7 people, bargain. And the start date was the 25th of May 2022. That was when we had our first meeting. And the end date was the 30th of September 2022 because we had a bit of a hiatus in August to allow for people's holidays. And the project documentation you can find on Gitbook. There's a link there which will also be in the description, and also our Miro board. So a lot of the work that the Subcircle did was around problem sensing. So let's have a look at some of the issues that we identified that proposers were facing. First of all, proposers, we don't always have time to engage in the ways that people might expect us to. Proposers tend to be busy doing their own work, and they don't always have time to come to meetings or engage a lot on a Discord server or things like that. So it was important for us as a team to try and reach proposers in a variety of ways that suited the time that they had. Some proposers, face barriers to participation. We found that language is a particularly huge one. Proposers, we're not aware of ourselves that much as a community. We don't realise that we are a community sometimes, and we don't know that we can change things if we work together. Throughout all this, I'm saying we rather than they, because all of the proposal team are proposers themselves. Proposers are sometimes scared to raise issues in Catalyst in case it damages our proposal's chances. That might be a well-founded fear or it might not, but we certainly found that it worries quite a lot of people and stops them from speaking up when they might like to. For most proposers, learning to manage our ADA can be tricky, and so can learning how to best monitor our work and keep a record of what we're doing. Proposers also worry about how to promote our work and our successes, and how to reach voters effectively. And there's also some worry about how to reach DREPs when DREPs come in Fund 10. And we also found that what's missing for a lot of proposers is tools to help us find each other, support each other and collaborate, because we are quite a distributed and diverse community. So, as I said, we used Miro board quite a lot to record the problems that we sensed and cluster them. And you can see an image here of our Miro board. And you can see how we clustered problems in different subject headings, such as building the funded proposers community, audit issues, managing price fluctuations, the process of getting funded, and so on. And we found Miro quite an effective tool for seeing the connections between different problems and things that were sensed in different areas of the community. And of course, you can have a closer look at the Miro board at the link in the description. Okay, so let's have a look at what the team actually did as part of the project. Well, first of all, we made a point of trying to meet proposers where they already are as much as we could, rather than trying to set up loads of new meetings and extra places to engage. We tried to make it as easy as possible. We sensed problems, saw connections, and looked for solutions. We made a particular point of addressing language inequality because our early problem sensing identified that as a really big barrier for a lot of proposers, so we saw it as a bit of a priority. And we also came to see it as a priority to look at ways of engaging dispersed communities in general. Funded proposers are not the only group within Catalyst that are like this, that are quite widely dispersed geographically and in terms of their interests, and that don't necessarily connect with each other that much on a regular basis or have a sense of themselves as a community. So it is quite important to think about how to engage people like that and how to hear their voices. So we tried to do that first of all by respecting their time and their ways of working. That's a little bit to do with meeting them where they are, but it's also about finding ways to engage with them that don't take a great deal of time or energy. And also recognizing the need for privacy in raising issues sometimes. That comes down to the issue that we noticed, that sometimes proposers are wary of raising things because they don't know whether it will rebound on them and damage their proposal's chances. Now let's run through some of the things that we achieved. We produced guidance notes for proposers to help them fill in the idea scale proposal form. And we also produced a guide to flagging inadequate PA assessments, which we discovered was something that not that many proposers really knew how to do. And we also commissioned translations of both of those things into 8 languages. We did a lot of problem sensing and solution finding with proposers across the world. And because of the proposal team's connection in various different parts of the world, we were able to do that really effectively. And we found some really good ways to work with our kind of community, this dispersed community that we'd identified. And the approaches we took were more co-produced, more decentralized, and more personal. We also did some really important thinking on recognizing the often hidden work that community builders do. A lot of the proposers we were engaging with were working on community building type projects, but also we ourselves were trying to build a community. So we became really conscious of how a lot of that work is often hidden. And it's interesting that the majority of the subcircle were women, and also the majority were from minority language communities. And those two groups are ones that historically have often found that their work doesn't get recognised. So it was interesting that as a team, we ended up doing so much thinking on what actually counts as work and how we can recognise hidden work more effectively. And another thing that we did was we created an alternative approach to how to function as a subcircle. The main other subcircle that was active in Catalyst at this point was the PAs subcircle. And PAs are just a really different type of community than the funded proposers are. So we felt it was quite important that we offered another way to organise and another way to be a subcircle. Part of doing that was looking at how to document our work. We came up with some quite interesting ideas and approaches to how to keep a record of what we were doing. And we also thought a lot about what representation really means. Since we were, in a sense, representing funded proposers, and since we had Mercy with a seat on Circle to represent funded proposers, we found it a really important thing to think about what representation really means and how it should work. And on the topic of representation, we ended up asking ourselves, what does it really mean to represent others? And we've produced a little slideshow as a starting point for that discussion. And you can see it at the link in the video description. And I'll also run through it at the end of this video for anyone who is interested and would like to have a look. Now let's have a look at what we actually learned from this project. First of all, we learned that language is a massive barrier for many proposers and can actually stop them feeling able to take part in Catalyst. This is something that Catalyst needs to be aware of, and in the interests of greater inclusivity and fairness, we need to start trying to look at how we can break down that barrier. And in doing that, we need to listen to people who are speakers of languages other than English and hear from them what would be most effective for us to do to break that barrier down. We also learned that the division between proposers and funded proposers probably isn't that useful most of the time. The two groups have quite similar concerns, we found, and so maybe splitting them up is not that helpful, and we should start seeing them as part of one overarching proposers community. We also learnt that we need several channels to hear proposers' voices. So not just challenge teams and not just coordinator meetings. We learnt how many different channels proposers use to communicate and what a diverse group they are. So we need to keep that diversity as much as we can. We also learnt that proposing is actually the heart of onboarding in many parts of the world. In many places, this is how people come into Cardano and into Catalyst, is as a proposer. So that makes the proposers community really significant. We also learned that social impact proposals are crucial for building engagement in Cardano. And this is not just in terms of the proposers themselves, but also in terms of the people that their proposals reach. So it is a really important element of what Cardano is doing. However, we found from a lot of proposers' opinions that since Fund 9, social impact proposals are really being increasingly squeezed out. So that is perhaps limiting people's engagement with Cardano or cutting down the possibilities for people to engage. We also learned that it's really important in the proposers community to foster collaboration, and especially that's collaboration between tech developers and other kinds of developers of community engagement, developers of education, of governance, and so on. It's important to try and find ways that we can speak to each other, because the most effective proposals tend to engage both sides of that divide. Now to look at next steps for the funded proposers subcircle. Unfortunately, our Fund 9 proposal, Proposers Hive, wasn't funded, so that won't be one of our next steps. But the connections that we made as a team hopefully will continue into the future. We also have a forthcoming Q&A event with IOG, looking at Fund 10 from a proposer's perspective. We haven't got a date for that, but we hope to have one soon. And finally, we hope that we or somebody in the community might do one of the two things that we noticed as a proposal team would be important, but that we lacked the resources to do ourselves. And the first one was to run an event for proposers on how to manage your ADA, which was something that we found a lot of people would like more information on. And the second one was to develop a proper searchable collaboration tool of some sort for proposers, mainly to help break down that tech dev, non-tech dev divide and encourage collaborations that engage both sides. There have been tools in the past, we know that, but often they were mainly aimed at the developer community. So it would be really good to have a tool that fostered collaboration across the whole. proposers community. And you can read our full closeout report with a bit more in-depth analysis and explanation of how we arrived at some of the things that we've been saying in this video, and the link is in the description. And it just remains for me to say thank you very much for watching. There is a little bit of bonus content though. As mentioned earlier, we have an extra little slideshow about our thinking on what representation means. So if people want to carry on watching, I'll run through those slides now. So here it is. This is a funded proposers subcircle talking point. We're not sure if there's going to be any more of these, or if this is just a one-off, but this one is about what is representation. So in Catalyst, we hear a lot about representation, both in the context of Circle and elsewhere. But what does it actually mean in a governance context to represent others? It can actually be quite tricky to determine who you represent, to say who your constituency is, and to say what obligations you have to that constituency. Is your constituency just those who voted for you? But how do you know who they are? You can't tell who they are. Is your constituency those who approach you for help? So wait, does that mean you have no obligations to people who don't actually approach you? Maybe is it everyone in Catalyst? There is a sense in which a person in office, for instance, in Catalyst Circle, does represent everyone. But then which side should they support if there's a disagreement? Or is your constituency actually nobody? Do we all simply represent ourselves and our own views? But assuming that you've decided who your constituency is, and assuming it's not just you yourself, how do you represent others? Well, first of all, it's not about you. If you're there to represent others in a meeting or some other place, that means you shouldn't be centering your own opinion. Your job is to let the meeting know the ideas and the thoughts of the people that you're there to represent. So you might sometimes need to say, I don't know until I go back and consult. Next, go and ask. If you're representing a group, don't wait for them to come to you and raise issues or give opinions. And if people don't approach you, don't assume that that means that they've got nothing to say. It's part of your role as a representative to get out there and ask people using lots of different approaches. And some of these approaches that you could be using include dedicated meetings after town halls, things like that, surveys, shared documents that people can contribute to, one-to-ones, focus groups where a small group of people come together to talk about an issue, vox pops and other information gathering events, piggybacking on an event that people are going to go to anyway and asking a question there and taking note of what people say, Twitter spaces, tweet threads, Discord and Telegram conversations, and so on. And not every interaction has to be lengthy or in depth to be of value, and not every interaction needs to be with lots of people to be of value. In fact, one-to-one conversations and small focus groups can be really powerful in gathering insights. Number 3, you've got to represent fairly. When you're representing others' views, you need to do it fairly and accurately, even if you disagree with them. Don't phrase it so that what they said sounds daft. And if the group disagrees internally, you'll need to represent all sides of that disagreement and present them all as valid. And finally, feedback. The people you're representing will want to know what happened at the meeting that you were representing them at, so keep them posted. In short, attending a meeting or an event means that you have a voice. Having a voice is, of course, a form of power. So if you're not attending as yourself, but you're there specifically to represent others, don't misuse that power. Use your voice to foreground them, not yourself. Thanks very much for watching.